Okay. 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 I may have a problem. So, context first for all of this. Around 2016, I got really into the blog Mid-Century Menu and the Twitter 70s Dinner Party, and they both publicized and talked about and researched and celebrated these wacky, weird mid-century food items. And that was really interesting to me, especially researching a lot of mid-century things, Disneyland, at the time. So, when I next visited my neighborhood thrift shop, I looked for a couple cookbooks and a couple Jello molds, and a habit was born. And I have been, for the past few years, collecting and compiling mid-century cookbooks. Or vintage cookbooks, anytime from no beginning date, I'm not picky, all the way up until my cutoff date, my personal cutoff of 1995. Why 1995? That's when I remember my mother introducing new recipes into the household. So at that, even if, as I age, 1995 gets more and more vintage, it is not interesting archaeology to me, because I remember it, alright? So I thought I might talk about my collection that continues to grow, hopefully a bit slower. I'm running out of bookcase space in the kitchen. So me talking about them and cataloging them in a huge spreadsheet, and eventually, at some point, I would like to start a cooking show with all of this someday. But right now, we're just talking about my collection. That I do enjoy my collection very much, and yeah, let's get into it because I got some fun stuff here. Let's start with things that barely count. These two things are my very first recipe card holder that was given to me for Christmas in 1999, and it has some family recipes on it back when I first started cooking as a 9-year-old. And then this is the book my mom made me, or well, she didn't make it. She wrote down all the family recipes in it when I got married for me to have and to like start out my housewifing, quote unquote. The pages that are stuck in there are family recipes that have been added since then, since I got better equipment and better at cooking. So these aren't technically vintage cookbooks in like the fun, wacky, too much mayonnaise and gelatin way, but it is recipes I know, a lot of which have lasted for at least 3 generations. And they are older recipes that have stood the test of time. That's something I'm very interested in, how mid-century cooking that we consider wacky and foreign has seeded roots in recipes we still enjoy in home cooking today. Other things that only count on technicality are recreation cookbooks. I also have at times collected theme park cookbooks, so I've got a couple of these, in that these are modern cookbooks that just include older recipes. This one, Chef Mickey, Treasures from the Vault, and Delicious New Favorites. This is a series of cookbooks of recipes found in the Disney parks. This one just includes older recipes that are no longer used. Most of which hail before my cutoff. So this one works. This one is called Eat Like Walt by Mary Carether Smothers. It is kind of a food biography of Walt Disney with recipes. So it includes like some personal recipes from his home cook, recipes from his favorite restaurants, just kind of tracing the lineage of Walt Disney through cooking. So a lot of older recipes in here as well. This one is the original book, but it is a reissue for the 50th anniversary, A Treasury of Great Recipes by Mary and Vincent Price. Yes, that Vincent Price. He was a notorious foodie and wrote several cookbooks. This is his most well-known one that he wrote with his second wife. What they did was they picked all their favorite restaurants across the world and recreated those recipes for home. And he was big on food egalitarianism, where a Dodger dog was just as good as something from a Parisian high-class restaurant. Some of the recipes are in the original language, and then it's translated to English. So my dude Vincent was very much about translating the original intent of the recipe and the restaurant into a home-cooked environment. It's beautiful. Charlie got it to me for Christmas, and I love it very much. But now on to the meat. The actual vintage cookbooks that I have found or were given to me, or I have searched for specifically in some cases. And I'm very proud that I have these. Let's start out with this humble moon pie box, which contains many treasures. So when Charlie was helping to clean out his late grandmother's house, he found several newspaper clippings and pamphlets of recipes, and this is where I keep all of them. They are very old. Most of them date from the early to mid 60s, some a little before, some a little after, but they are all loose leaf newspaper in this box, and I handle them with gloves because they are fragile. But it is very exciting to me to read these, read what was in a newspaper in that time or a magazine. It's funny to read the ads and articles that are on the backs of these recipes, because there's, oh boy, there's some wild rides in there. Another thing he found was a bunch of pamphlets. Pamphlet recipe books were commonly sold with appliances or as promotional recipe booklets to go with products. We've got several like Pillsbury, Knudsen, there's a KitchenAid blender, pamphlet cookbook, but a lot of these date from 60s to 70s, once again, found in his grandmother's estate, and were given to me when we got married. These two next ones only barely squeak by, only because they were my first cookbooks. This one is from, I think, 1989, when my brother was a little kid, and then this one's from the mid-90s when I was a little kid. These were the first cookbooks I ever used or drew any kind of inspiration from, and I've just kept them for however many decades I've been alive. And now they get to join the collection. And this was also in Charlie's grandmother's house in the category of Child's Cookbook, sponsored by Pure Cane Imperial Sugar Company, Sugar Land, Texas. That's what most of these pamphlet books are sponsored by, either whole industry, a company. I like it. It's got his aunt's name in there. So this was her first cookbook as well. So we are keeping good care of this. Some more pamphlets I have. I purchased these at the flea market for like $3 a piece. This one is the Royal Cream of Tartar cookbook from 1944. We are wartime. We are rationing. Most things are in cans. This one is going to be fun. Only barely looked through it yet. And then we have the Frigidaire recipe book, which looks so old and dingy because it is from 1932. This is not my oldest cookbook. It's my second oldest. It is from the 30s. It's got some glorious pictures and illustrations. Same for the Cream of Tartar book, honestly. There is a Frigidaire user's constructions for a Frigidaire refrigerator in the back that is still there. Very excited about these. This was a birthday gift from my roommate Cassie. It is the Hillbilly Cookin' Mountaineer style from the Trading Post in Renfrew Valley, Kentucky. This one is dated 1968. Looks like a souvenir cookbook from probably somewhere on the Appalachian Trail. Clinch Mountain Lookout. So if anyone knows where Thornhill, Tennessee is, this one is mostly written in like hillbilly dialect, which I can understand, but not everyone can. It's really cute. It's got a little redneck man on the back. It's very funny. Also, speaking of the country, as well as my theme park cookbook obsession, I got the original printing of the Knott's Berry Farm cookbook. I found it online from 1976. This has gold in it. It has the fried chicken. It has the boysenberry pie. It has everything. It has like the stew from the Chop House. It has a cute little thing about Cordy and Walter in there. This is back when they still owned the Knott's Preserves Company. So everything has a Knott's Preserve in it. Beautiful food illustrations. This one's a real gem. It's the one that kicked off the transition from theme park cookbooks to vintage cookbooks. So I'm very excited for this. This was the one I've actually made the most things from. Non-monetized, it's just good cooking. So these two are from an antique store near my house. The Joys of Jello, 1961. It's a treasure. So many gelatin recipes, only a little of which are savory and involve things like onions and olives. But they're here to try. And then this is treasured honey recipes, as far as I can tell, from the late 60s, early 70s, from a hive in Whittier, California. Their promotional pamphlet will have honey recipes in that one. Also, once news of my collection started getting out, people started giving me cookbooks. Like my mom has unloaded several cookbooks on me. One of which is Cooking with a Surprising Difference. It is a copyright 1966 from the Carnation Company, so evaporated milk. And she also gave me Cuisine Continentale, Unusual Recipes, Gems of French Cooking, and Other Culinary Masterpieces by Armand Coulet, who was a French chef in Jackson in 1955, which is when this book comes from. So this is both older and from my hometown. And what else did she give me? She gave me this Federation of Women's Clubs 1999 cookbook. There are a lot of the best vintage cookbooks, I know it's floppy, you're ever going to find are from churches, women's societies, where everyone just contributes their best company recipes. And usually those are passed down generation to generation. This one, because it's from 1999, it's probably out of the cutoff. It's definitely out of the cutoff. But because my grandmother was president of Women's Club for a long time in Alabama, I know there's some older recipes in this, so I'll have to go through it to find the old stuff. But I do have the church cookbook from my home church back in Jackson from 1994. So these have got some good stuff, and I know a good portion of the women in this book who contributed recipes. They were my preschool moms. We'll get to some more. I see them. They're just piled under the pile. I'm slowly working my way. When I started collecting vintage cookbooks, I was really, whatever is in the thrift stores, whatever is in the Goodwill that I can find that's suitably old enough, that's interesting, that catches my eye. Now, as my collection has grown, I'm a little more discerning. I'm skewing a bit older, just because I know I don't have that many. And if something is incredibly interesting, I will buy it. Such as this one, Cooking with Country Music Stars, from 1986. Cooking with Country Music Stars by the Country Music Company. And this one, I found at the flea market for $1. I could not resist. It's got Dolly Parton in there. It's got Ronnie Millsap, Lee Greenwood, Ricky Skaggs, and Kenny Rogers. got Conway Twitty and Tammy Wynette. You should see the Italian recipes. There's a recipe in here called American Stir Fry. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. And I just love how unique this is and how funny it is to me. So this is the kind of unique I'm looking for right now. As far as uniqueness goes, this year's Christmas gift from Charlie is this one, How to Cook and Eat in Chinese by Bu-Wei Yang Chow. He got the idea for this one from John Green, who mentioned it in a Block Brothers video, as this is one of the first Chinese cookbooks written in English for English-speaking people by a Chinese-American immigrant. This is not a first printing. He could not find a first printing. They were all snatched up. This one was originally printed in 1956. This printing was from 1972. The voice of this book is very funny. Sometimes cookbooks are just collections of recipes from other people. Sometimes cookbooks are very professional or very written by an ad company. And then sometimes you get a book with a voice that has the author's like true personality in there. This is one of them. And Mrs. Chow is talking about how people ask why you don't translate the fancier Chinese dishes into English. Why aren't you showing off with like stewed snakes or shark's fin and silver netting? And her answer is, my purpose in writing such a book was in the first place to instruct and not to impress. Everybody has to cook and eat. If you live where you can get special Chinese materials, well and good. If not, you can always cook in Chinese with Western materials, although since the last edition came out, more and more vegetables and fruits formerly regarded as exotic have appeared in general markets. And I love that passage. It is to instruct, not impress, because most of the people that used these books are not chefs. They are not professionals. They are housewives and bachelors and home cooks and people learning to cook for the first time. And that's kind of why I love even the weird gelatin recipes, because that's what regular people looked at and were like, most of this does not work, but I will take what I want from it. And that's the archaeology I love about vintage cookbooks, is who is reading this and who wants to be this. Moving on. This is another one from the antique store. It is called Elsie's Cookbook. It is for Elsie the cow, for the dairy company. The adorable thing is when I purchased this, it's got the cook's favorite newspaper recipes kind of glued to the inside jacket. And in the back as well. To me, that's the holy grail. If you can find not just a cookbook, but one that's been used and one that's been added to over the years, that is a joy for me to find. I feel honored to have part of that person's story. This book is from 1952. It is sponsored by the dairy company who did Elsie the cow. The funny thing about it, in addition to having a lot of dairy-rich recipes in it, is every chapter is preceded by this little fanfic excerpt of Elsie and Elmer, her husband, that are illustrated. So you have a little picture of Elsie and Elmer and then a little conversation. It's super charming and very cute. This is a delight. This one is from the thrift shop, The Working Woman's Cookbook and Entertainment Guide by Pat McMillan. This is another one that's written by a person, intended to be a person, a person's voice. It is from 1983. So we've got that very 80s working 9 to 5. It is laid out in menu form, which means it goes by not length of prep time, but the amount of prep time it would take to be done with everything by dinner. So it's laid out a little differently, and it's got little tips for freezing ahead of time and how to industrialize your kitchen. This next one came to my knowledge from a Twitter conversation between the artist Brie Paulson and Elisa Hansen, or maybe they even tied on YouTube, and they were talking about the Dracula cookbook, which is a delight. So immediately I looked for one and found one. This one is not the first printing, but it is an earlier printing, 1978. Authentic Recipes from the Homeland of Count Dracula by Marina Polve. And it's divided into two sections. First section is very entertaining heavy. Like, these are things you make for company, for a party. And seemingly a themed party. A Dracula themed party, like Midnight International Buffet for 25 voracious vampires. And it has these adorable illustrations. They're very Edward Gorey's Dracula. But then the second half is all actual Hungarian, Romanian recipes that are just good things to fix for a family. And they've still got the funny, like, bat illustrations on them, too. And it's very cute. I enjoy it. So this next one's fun, because it is a synagogue cookbook from 1964 from the Friends and Relatives of the Temple Menorah Sisterhood Cookbook Committee. And I've never seen a synagogue cookbook before. It's really cute. It's got little, like, ads for local businesses on there as well. And I just think it's from Redondo Beach. So, nearby. And I just think it's darling. And in the same way, we have the favorite recipes of Redeemed Lutheran Ladies something. Most of the thing is popped off. But this is another one where recipes have been hidden in the cookbook itself. So this was a well-used, well-loved one. Redeemer Lutheran Ladies, there we go. Sponsored, someone got this in a Reba. Sponsored by the Dorcas Society. So we don't have a date on this one, but I can presume it is old. But it is one with so many recipe cards. I'm so excited. This was another thrift store find. Barbecues, picnics, and parties. Presented by the California Home Economics teachers. Another one I'm going to venture guess at mid-70s to early 80s. If I cannot find a date. That is my guess as to the date. This one is also a contributed cookbook from different teachers and people, and it's got lovely food photography. And we have another newspaper find in it. Lemon basil zucchini. This one was an antique store find. Visiting my parents in Alabama. It's $5. Recipes on parade. Casseroles. 2,000 worldwide favorites of military officers' wives. With a foreword by Mrs. Lyndon B. Johnson. you got Lady Bird offering her own. And it's a white bread recipe, y'all. Lady Bird Johnson contributed a white bread recipe for the Officers' Wives Cookbook. Learn where the dates go in books, kids. And figuring that it's from the Johnson administration, I'm going to venture early 70s. It's got some doozies of casseroles. Noodled tuna! And again, some lovely food photography. It's another thrift store cookbook, the Just Cookbook from the National Square Dance Convention, Silver Anniversary, 1976. Did y'all know Eisenhower included square dancing in school curriculums because he hated jazz music? It's another contributed cookbook. It's very simple. Got a cute picture of the White House in the first few recipes. Miracle Whip cake. I need y'all to know I'm going to get distracted. And there's really cute interstitial illustrations that I'm pretty sure were, in fact, done by children. And then this was 99 cents at the cookbook. Jan Worth's Happy Living Cookbook. Organized like a file folder. And from what I can tell, the Worth Company, or Worthington Foods, was like a soy-based meat and dairy substitute company. They have things like chocolate burger, vegetarian entree, ham style. I'm not going to say they were the most appetizing looking of foods, but they were innovative. The illustrations, I think, put it in the 70s. Betty Crocker's Hostess Cookbook. I'm pretty sure this one came from my mom. Where it not only has recipes, but like tablescaping Tips and pointers, courtesy of Betty Crocker. And then we have the Pillsbury Family Cookbook. This one is from 1969, original edition 1963. It is thick and full of recipes, very pretty food photography, and just pointers on how to frost a cake. And this might be my mom, because this looks like my mom's handwriting in the front. Or my grandmother's. Or it could be the antique store. I have a lot of these. This one is another flea market find. Great meals in minutes. American regional menus. Goes by part of the country and sets out a whole menu. 1984. This looks like one of those like Time Life book sets that they used to infomercial all the time. But they have lovely food pictures. It's one of those picture cookbooks where you just kind of show off more than you actually cook from. This one, the Searchlight Recipe Cookbook from Household Magazine. Oh, look how pretty that is. Just glorious Technicolor. This is how you can tell this was at least 50s, is that style of food photography. And then this printing was in 1942. The fun thing about this book is that all of the sections are labeled in like little tabs here, like an old Bible. Canning, cereals, cheese, frozen dessert, and turn to that, and just chock full of recipes and like variants on recipes, which is really useful. Short recipes too, so there's a lot of volume in this little book, and I'm very excited to go through it. This was a gift from my roommate Zach's mom, who's like, oh hey, Haley likes old cookbooks, right? How about this one? This is the Martha Dixon's Copper Kettle Cookbook, 1963. It's another one of those. This looks like it's mostly for company recipes, basically things you would prepare, not just quick, easy meals. These are prepared for impressing people. Tea biscuits, Brazil nut sensation. I love it. And it's a hefty hardback cookbook, which, with all the pamphlets I got in the early times, that's very helpful. This is my oldest cookbook. It's the Pine Tree State Rebecca Cookbook. And I'm being very gentle, as you'll find out in a second. It is dated 1928. Far as I can tell, it was from Maine. It looked to be one of those cookbooks that was combination actual cookbook, and then like local businesses would advertise. This might have been periodical. But the fascinating thing is that this is not how a modern recipe is laid out. It's very, you get your measurements when you get them. And that's how you can tell it's a much older cookbook, is just the way those recipes are structured very differently. And there's lots of them. This is dense, because there's not a lot of filler. But this is almost 100 years old, and it was made its way to me. Onward to more things my mom gave me. We have the Southern Living 5-Star Recipe Collection. Juniper. It's also laid out like a school project. Now this is also like guide to herbs, not just recipes, but different things. Copyright 1990, so it's about as old as I am. Everything is, again, laid out with nice illustrations and tabs. Those tabs, I find, are useful. There's an entire tab for microwave. Out there. Microwave orange souffle, guys! And this was, of course, put out by the Southern Living magazine. So, magazines, usually because they're already publication companies, can put out more substantial, more hefty things like these, because they already have the resources. And they would often be used as, like, home ec guides for younger people, but let's face it, wives, back in the day, starting out and learning to cook for people. We also, from my mom, have Your Foods book, which I'm pretty sure is her middle school home ec textbook. Because it's got her maiden name in there. 1964, she would have been 11. from 1964, and it has like hostess tips. At the proper time, reserve refreshments. You should be able to do this easily at home because you've done it at school. Home ec textbook. It also goes into like the science and like structure of meals and food. So this is just gonna be a good reference book. Why don't they have home ec in school and why isn't it required? It's my bugbear. Back to the thrift store finds, we have the Farm Journal's Country Cookbook. My notation system was not always digital, so that's why there's a bit of confetti going up the top. I am going to fix it. This is from the Farm Journal. It's another one of those magazine compilation cookbooks. This one's original copyright 1959. This edition's 1972. Again, you can tell by that really warm glow over all the food. We're strongly in the late 60s to 70s here. But this also has a lot of game recipes, as in squirrel stew for 12. So I'm very curious about some of the recipes in this book and have no idea how I'm actually going to pull it off. And then, another thrift store find, Easy Cooking for Today, Guide to Modern American Cooking. It's very photograph heavy. It's a coffee table cookbook. It's from 1986. So we have that very kind of technicolor but a little too crisp food photography that marks the 80s, and they have very specific instructions for everything. This is very much cooking for beginners. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the Galloping Gourmet Cookbook, Graham Care's Culinary Collection. It looks to be one of those things you had to sign up on QVC for. Copyright 1972. Graham Care looks to be originally an Australian cook or chef. Very slightly upscale, but he does have things like a diagram on how to break apart a chicken. He's got the nice food pictures. There's oysters in it. Very fancy book that I got for not too much money at the thrift store. Then, this was another Charlie Christmas present. The First Lady's Cookbook. Favorite recipes of all the presidents of the United States. This book is new to us, but the actual book, there's a bit of history where my mom used to have the 1966 printing of this book. And I always wanted it as a kid, but now I have my own copy. And the fascinating thing about this is more of a reference material for how each president ate in that time period and like his relationship to food at the time. And then these beautiful pictures of recreations of their favorite dishes. This goes all the way back to George Washington and then goes all the way up to Lyndon B. Johnson. So you have a history of food in America that goes from the Revolution to the late 60s, which, at least for rich people, you know. It also includes a lot of good tidbits about the First Ladies, who I think are unsung in their ability to do emotional labor for the whole dadgum country. And then we have these babies. This is a set of 12 cookbooks, not cookbooks, and cooking encyclopedias. It is the Woman's Day Encyclopedia of Cookery. From A to Z to Index. Some of these I looked for, and then the entire set I found on Craigslist for $30. And I was not going to pass that up, especially when it was going to take me twice as much time and money to complete the set on my own. So now I have the whole thing. It is not just like sets of recipes. It goes A to Z, starting with acorn squash and like the seasons of different produce. It has entire sections on like types of apples, cuts of meat, different menus for different social occasions. Every country you could think of when this was published in 1966. In 1966, it had like all the countries, like British cooking, Irish cooking, Mexican cooking, examples of cuisine from all these different countries represented in this book. This could be a series of cooking through these all by itself. but they are fascinating and they are resourceful and they are interesting. And they are part of history. And there are all these books. So there you have it. This is my huge, untenable vintage cookbook collection. Like I said, I'm running out of cabinet space in my kitchen trees. So I'm kind of slowing my roll on getting new ones. But you know what? If you have pamphlets that I could stuff in the moon pie tin, we can talk. My cutoff is no minimum, maximum, $19.95. I also have a few repeat pamphlets and books that I do not need anymore. They are doubles that I might put on eBay if there's an interest in them. Otherwise, this is the collection. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in me going through these books just for gold and enjoyment of finding things. I also have more recipes that I've only found online that are stored in a Word document. So let me know how you feel about future content with the collection. Otherwise, like, share, subscribe. Tell me your favorite old passed down from the family recipe. And we'll talk it out in the comments. Yeah, I have a Patreon if you want to feed this habit. You can join or not join or cease from joining at any time. And yeah, thank you guys for coming. Stay safe. Happy cooking. Enjoy your kitsch. I know I will.